Beautiful. So welcome everybody to the Resilient Minds podcast. I'm grateful here today because we are spending time with a very incredible, eloquent, expressive gentleman. Is Giacomo Zucco. Am I pronouncing your name right, brother?
Just the accent is Giacomo, which is the Italian
Yeah.
equivalent of James, basically, or Jacques, Iago, Giacomo.
Giacomo. So Giacomo, I had the pleasure of connecting. Well, really, we kind of got to know each other through a friend. However, Emmanuel, shout out to Emmanuel. And but I watched this beautiful man share his heart, his spirit, his true integrity, and his soul, really what he stands for out on stage and Bitcoin Atlantis. And the way that he presents himself, you can feel the level of integrity and alignment in his being. So, brother, can you share just a little bit about yourself? How long you've been in the space, a little bit more about your magic and what you're currently doing in the world.
Sure. So I come from a very traditional field. I was studying theoretical physics, and then I started to work for a multinational company, Accenture, in traditional payments. So it was a very fiat job, as we will call you right now as a Bitcoiners. Very fiat job, very normal. But then in 2000, at the end of 2012, I started to get in contact with Bitcoin in very strange ways because Bitcoin was basically stalking me and following me around. Basically, I was working in Accenture in payments, and I started to hear about Bitcoin as a possible payment technology. But that was just it, the technology. 1 week after, I was in a group with some people that were protesting outside of the embassy in London, where Julian Assange was captive already back then in 2012. And this group was still talking on, I think it was WhatsApp or something, and they started to talk about Bitcoin as this kind of privacy money that you can also use to donate to WikiLeaks because they take away the other ways to donate to WikiLeaks. So these two topics, they have nothing in common. Like my work colleagues, they knew nothing about Assange. They care nothing. It was just my thing to work there and be in that group. And then I was in a group translating some Mises.org, von Mises Institute articles of it, Austrian Schools of Economics in Italian. And these people were not interested in WikiLeaks or Assange or privacy or activism. They were usually gold bugs, people interested in gold, sun money, inflation, macroeconomic things, nothing about activism or privacy or whatever. So I started to, and they started, and I started to read there about Bitcoin as a new gold standard, as a new way to fight the central bank distortive incentives. So from three areas of my life, spheres of my life that I consider completely non-overlapping except for me, Bitcoin started to follow me all around, and that was in the course of 3 weeks. So basically, I became obsessed in about Bitcoin. I could not work anymore. I could not think about anything else. And a few months, this was December 2012, January 2013, and a few months later, in May 2013, my wife Mir, she's also an expert of multi-potential lifestyle. So she follows a lot of tricks and hacks how to integrate different kind of passions. And she told me, you should quit your job. This stuff, Bitcoin, you're talking about Bitcoin all the time. You want to have a job in technology, and Bitcoin is technology. You feel like you want to be an activist on social ideal causes, and Bitcoin is a social ideal causes. So she told me, just go and do it. So I did. I quit my job, my fiat job, and I tried to do Bitcoin startups for all 2013. Most of them were cosmic level bullshit. I mean, I didn't understand anything back then. I created so many useless businesses back then. Most of them failed, at least not scamming anybody, but they failed bad, most of them. A few survived, like a wallet that you can still use today. It's called Blockstream Green. I was the first employee of the second employee actually of the company Green Address back in 2013. So some of those companies made it. Some I closed them until in 2015 I opened. I realized that what I was doing was making money just consulting banks and consulting companies and insurances. So big fiat companies were paying me to teach them about Bitcoin, and I was using most of the money, except for providing for our family. I was using most of the money to keep alive Bitcoin startups with zero reliable business models and revenue models. So I decided to make this a business model. So I created the research center that was basically hosting for free the most important and the most brilliant Bitcoin developers from all around the world. And the only thing that I asked in exchange was knowledge. Teach me, give me knowledge, explain me, correct me, tell me what you do. Then I had my employees helping these guys in any way, logistically, technically, legally, in any way, extracting the information, packaging the information, and reselling it to the fiat world, basically. And this lasted for 4 beautiful years. But then we had our first baby, our first daughter. So I closed down the laboratory and I stayed Bitcoin freelance for a couple of years. I am a very, very small investor in some Bitcoin companies like Rely, Ocean, Xsets. I'm an advisor to bring. So I did small things, and then finally they trapped me again into doing something as a director. So now, starting from the last October, I'm the director of the Plan B network, planb.network, which is basically a project to aggregate and systematize all the Bitcoin education, which is all around the world, which is great, but it's very scattered around, very redundant. Everybody's trying to reinvent the wheel with the new Bitcoin 101. So what I try to do is try to systematize, reorganize, integrate other people's work in education, and also to integrate at the same level Bitcoin geographical hotspots, because I think that the core of education is, I mean, you can do e-learning is great. And what we are doing now is great. What you are doing with the viewers is great. But physical meetings have a kind of bandwidth that is impossible to replace yet, at least. So we need also physical locations where people can meet, work together. And that was a game changer for me to have this place in Milan for 4 years, where I was really at the same table with the best Bitcoin developers and researchers. So I'm also trying to go, let's say, the little bit real estate part. Like it's startuppers like to always do these stupid comparison games. So it's a little bit like a Bitcoin version of Khan Academy meeting Bitcoin version of Booking.com or Airbnb.
I love it, brother. And so, before we go deeper, because I'd love to know. So, Plan B Network is really focused on making sure that the network that we're building globally, infrastructure wise, is not duplicating itself. Is that what I'm hearing?
Especially in the education part and in the management of physical places. I mean, if I spent a lot of effort personally to also work on technical infrastructure, technical specifications, in order not to have redundancies. You know, the famous XKCD joke in which you have 46 competing standards, so you create a committee to unify it, and now you have 47 competing standards. So I did that for technical things, but I still do. I participate to the LSP standard group, specification group. I participate still with the LNPBP Foundation with many standards. But this Plan B network is mostly about education. Many good Bitcoiners all around the world, they want to do education. Let's say somebody in Africa is going to create this Bitcoin center to educate Benin people. The problem is that they will write from scratch a Bitcoin 101 course, and they will see what works and what not doesn't. But we did that already for 100 times, so it doesn't make sense for you to reinvent the wheel again. I will just ship to you an educational package. You can customize it, you can localize it, but I will connect you with the best speakers already. I know the sponsor, so we basically try to connect students, teachers, sponsors in an effective market. The revenue model is basically nothing more than the typical commercial network in which I connect demand and offer of education, and I eventually will take a fee. Plus, I do some courses myself, so I also put myself as a producer, as a maker of some of this knowledge.
Amazing, man. I love it. And so tell us a little bit about the back story of like the traditional physics side of it, and how do you see that those physics kind of aligning with Bitcoin? Because I've heard so many times, Bitcoin is nature, Bitcoin is physics, Bitcoin is energy. So maybe we can help that illuminated approach for anybody that doesn't understand what that might mean, especially coming from this traditional physics background that you have.
So, as a physics nerd, I actually take issues with most of the metaphors that are being used. They are very effective. Like when Michael Saylor says Bitcoin is a battery, is a wall of encrypted energy or something like that. It's very poetic. He basically transmits an idea that I think it's effective for his targets, which is basically corporate investors and people like that. For me, as a physics nerd, that's a little bit disturbing because there are very specific meanings of the words. So Bitcoin is very, very interesting from a physical point of view. The main data structure of Bitcoin, the very famous blockchain, now it is a buzzword, it is used for everything. But in Bitcoin, the blockchain is a very clear data structure with these blocks that grows. There is a paper actually
We call
that
it time chain, right? For us,
right,
it's time
right.
chain.
Very good. Very, very
Yeah.
good. Satoshi Nakamoto called it never called it blockchain. He called it time chain in the code and proof of work chain in the white paper. The term blockchain, since it is made of blocks, started to evolve later after Satoshi had led the project, and it started to be used as a umbrella buzzword to put everything together. So time chain is actually very, very good. And there is a mathematician that basically discover something which this is just one example of many, that basically if you use the block height, so the number of blocks as the equivalent of time, and use the total cumulative proof of work as the equivalent of energy, you can rebuild something which is fundamental in physics, which is the time energy non-commutation relationship by Heisenberg. So sounds like something super complex. But the idea is that the more you know the energy of some process, the less you know how long the process lasts. And the more you know the time of the process, the less you know the energy involved. This is true, for example, also if you look at waves, any kind of waves. If you know the frequency, think about if you have drums. If you just make it one sound of hitting the drum, that sound will have a very clear position in time because it's like tuck and then it's over. But you cannot tell the frequency. The frequency is a mess. There is not a clear frequency. On the other side, if you play a violin, you can have a a frequency which is almost pure, but there is no precise, like the time is very long. You cannot make it in 1 second. It must last. So there is this relationship, this complicated relationship between time and energy, and Bitcoin replicates that with proof of work. And then there are other things, like there is a brilliant German guy that made a speech about connecting Bitcoin with the paradox of black hole entropy. That's also another topic that seems incredibly complex, but these are not jokes. Like there is something, because Bitcoin is at the epicenter of many fundamental things. One of them being the technological structure of Bitcoin is an attempt to recreate a time change, so a time rule, a time clock in a distributed way, in a decentralized way, without any kind of central authority. So this seems like something super niche, super specific, but it's something very universal. It's a way to create a decentralized clock that nobody can control. It's not a very precise clock, but it's a very neutral clock that nobody can take over. So this has a lot of consequences in physics, actually. And then on top of that, you have cryptography. Cryptography is all about deep mathematical concepts and physical concepts like computational reducibility and entropy. So when you create a wallet, when you create a Bitcoin wallet, you will create your seed phrases, your secret phrases, the secret 12 words to keep your Bitcoin. And usually what we try to measure is how much entropy, which means how much randomness you have in order to create really random words. Otherwise, people can guess them. So entropy is a strong thermodynamical concept. Boltzmann, physics is all about entropy. But so many things. The connection are endless, and some of us, there is a small subgroup of physics nerd inside Bitcoin that are having a lot of fun to create the connection.
And by the way, I was listening to a few of you on stage at Bitcoin Atlantis, and I was in awe of the depth and layering that you were all discussing in such a beautiful way, because to me, it sounded like poetry. and that the level of depth that you guys were talking, I don't know if most people can understand it. However, I do feel that it's so important to bring that to the forefront, to literally hear you guys speak and hear you guys communicate at that high of a level, because with that level of focus and detail, because it gives an awareness of the soundness of what is happening from a different map of the world. And I think that a lot of people, they don't hear these conversations out loud. And for me, it was like it was exciting to listen, because it's important that people recognize that, hold on, there's brilliant minds that are essentially, physicists, rocket scientists, people that are really developing the ground level components of this, to make sure that this is not just a theory or an idea. This is something that has been sound, developed, and is evolving with some of the soundest and most brilliant minds in the planet.
I agree. Not just brilliant, but what you find in Bitcoin, echoing my first, echoing the tale of my first encounter with Bitcoin encounters. What you find in Bitcoin is really what my wife would call the multidisciplinarity, multipotentiality. So you can find people embracing very different fields. Bitcoin is not one specialty. If you One of the things that we notice that we have many good Bitcoin developers, great Bitcoin developers, and when they write code, they are great. But when they talk about economics, they don't get it. Some of them, not all, but some of them, they don't get it. They maybe have been trained as a Keynesian, so they don't understand saving. They just fixate on spending, or they don't understand the Schelling points for which a fixed set of rule is more important than the specific rule that you choose. The fact that you cannot change the rules is more important than the rule. So they want to change the protocol continuously. And these are developers that are great in their field, but they don't grasp economics. Now you have
Right.
investors that get the value proposition of the investment, but not be, by being completely unaware of the technical part. They may expect unrealistic trade-off from the technology. They don't understand the pain point. They don't understand why we don't go in some direction. Why is not everything possible? And then you have both, that they can, maybe somebody that can understand the financial point of view, the speculative point of view, and the technical. But if you don't have some kind of idealistic basically drive, then you don't understand why people are actually joining Bitcoin, not just as a tool, but also as some kind of idealistic movement. So you
I
have
would
to
even
have
call it
all of them.
I would even call it a responsibility, or like a responsibility to oneself. If you don't have a ambition or a way of being that is more than greater than yourself, then you will not understand Bitcoin. Because it's not about any of us. It's about so much bigger than all of us. And I think that that's what makes it so profound and so powerful from my perspective, is because it's not about you or me. It's about sovereignty, genuine sovereign connection, and allowing people to break free from a, a hypnosis or a system that they don't even know they're a slave to yet. And so I think this is where our collective responsibility, by us discovering this, is like, how do we serve in that level of congruence that is so much more greater? And going back to the economics of it, is like, economic prosperity of the people is what defines the economic prosperity of us all. And so if people are not doing well, and people are not emphasizing their best passions, desires, their multidisciplinary focus, like your wife is helping and has helped you, by the way. And so it doesn't bring out this true nature, this true passion. And so I think that this is something that we get to integrate. And what I'm seeing with Bitcoin is a lot of people are integrating their passions, their sovereignty, their responsibility. And it's our duty now to bridge that economic prosperity from the old standard, the bullshit standard, the corrupt standard, to now a new golden standard. And so my question to you, bro, as we do this, or as we are really part of the forefront of this emphasis, how do you see now, so traditional businesses, traditional banking, traditional finance, transitioning or bringing that level of standard now into this new infrastructure, or helping them, guiding them, help building it alongside them into the new golden standard, into the new economic paradigm, into the new digital economy, and what we're here to really uphold with those levels of standards and values.
So we'll probably subdivide this category of traditional businesses into at least three steps. One is
Yep.
businesses that are not strictly connected with the monetary engineering, with the advanced financial engineering. So they are just providing some good or services, and they're just using money for three reasons: get paid by clients, store money for the future, so make a budget for the future, and pay providers and basically paying the services, the raw materials coming in. If you are one of these companies, then the integration of Bitcoin, even with many challenges, is, at least theoretically speaking, is kind of trivial. So from the point of view of being paid by clients, Bitcoin gives you access potentially and optionally. So if you want, you can still accept fiat, but you can also accept people paying you from all the world, including the majority of people on this planet are underbanked. It means that they don't have access to traditional finance, and they don't have access to global internet-based commerce. Why? Because they don't have a KYC AML identity, which is very expensive to maintain. So if what they provide as a value is positive, but is lower than the cost of this KYC bureaucracy, they are completely excluded. So if you sell for Bitcoin, you can access a market which is still small actually, but is global and growing and untappable with anything else. This is not new. I remember businesses already in 2013, especially some kind of businesses, not all, of course, but businesses. I remember in Italy, 2013, an e-commerce just selling electronics, and they had all these Indian guys paying Bitcoin for the simple reason that payment from India to Italy from Swiss was inefficient, and with Bitcoin it was better. So a simple choice of accepting a payment. They didn't have to integrate Bitcoin at any very deep level. They just needed to accept Bitcoin payment. Now, this is not trivial, because now you have to be able to accept also small payment. So you have to integrate the Lightning Network. So you have to be able to understand how to integrate Bitcoin in different ways. But it's something that, theoretically speaking, is very trivial. The second point would be storing your wealth. Even if you don't receive money in Bitcoin, so you are not having any Bitcoin clients, still, if you store your wealth in Bitcoin, you are basically fighting inflation and fighting. You are not forced. Many people under the fiat clown world, many people are forced to transform from savers to speculative investors, because if they keep the money in the bank account as cash, this cash will be devaluated brutally. And they say it's like 8% now, 7%, but of course it's more, because the real inflation is not the CPI. The CPI is a joke. The real inflation must include all the markets that are directly impacted by the new money printing, which is healthcare, education, military, and of course stock market itself. The prices of stock market are going up because of inflation. So if you are a company and you don't want to suffer inflation so much, but you don't want to just try to invest in any kind of bullshit elevator pitch that you come into because you're desperate to find some place to save your money, Bitcoin is something, even in this case, is not simple. So I don't want to oversell the simplicity of it, because, for example, the volatility of Bitcoin is such that if you can afford a long time horizon of saving, let's say more than 4 years, then is a great store of value, the greatest. I mean, you have no problem. If you receive Bitcoin and store Bitcoin, or if you receive fiat and you change in Bitcoin, you keep Bitcoin, and you have a time horizon in which you don't need liquidity for more than 4 years, you are in a very good position. But if you need short-term stability, like if you're going to receive the money now and you have to pay your providers in 1 week, and you cannot afford to be $1 below, then the volatility of Bitcoin will be very, very challenging. But still, many like Michael Saylor, Orange Pill, a lot of public companies to keep part of the treasury in Bitcoin. Even if you don't want to keep everything in Bitcoin, if you just keep something in Bitcoin, you are keeping something in an asset which is decorrelated from your stocks and your bonds and your fiat cash and your real estate and your other commodities. Being decorrelated, it will lower the overall risk of the portfolio. So it's already a good move just to have it a component. Plus, the one part of the Bitcoin saving is fighting inflation. The other part is fighting confiscation. If you are in a low interest rate regime with a lot of money printing, then you will have inflation. But at least the economy will be pumped. But if now you are in the crunch in which the interest rates are exploding and everything is collapsing, now you don't have a problem of inflation anymore. Maybe you even have deflation, but now you have a problem of confiscation, mass confiscation of businesses that happen in many, many places, many, many times. Treasuries of business being completely confiscated by the government. With Bitcoin, of course, you can still be persuaded to give it away by guns with guns, but yeah, there is this saying that possession is half of property. Like when you have the control, maybe you can still be convinced with the good cop or the bad cop can still convince you to give it away, but now it's on you. While with a bank account, it's not on you. If somebody else decides that your treasury, company treasury, must be confiscated because there is a national emergency, a war, global warming, the pandemics, whatever, click confiscated. With Bitcoin, you are physically the only one with the key, with the knowledge to move it. If you refuse, they cannot. That's a power that many people, many entrepreneurs don't even remember this power anymore. Maybe they know that they have the key to the real estate, but they don't even remember anymore how it was to be the sole controller of the wealth of the industry. You still have to manage if the government is coming to confiscate and you say no, maybe they take something else. So it's still not trivial, but it's unlocking a power which is incredible. And then there is the last phase, which is paying your providers, which is also something that people don't consider, but is not always necessary or interesting. But for some businesses, it is. I have a client in Italy which is importing saffron from Iran. He has all the needed permissions to bypass all the political like sanctions. So he is fully regulated. He can, and the plane full of saffron will arrive from Iran to Milan without any problem. But now he will have to pay the provider, and he can't because no payment from a bank will pass through that. And 1 year ago, almost now, this point is 2 years ago, this guy started to just say, okay, I buy Bitcoin, I sell Bitcoin. It was already legal, but it was basically not permitted by practically. So now he can. So these kind of businesses, including public companies like the companies adopting Bitcoin treasury like Tesla or many, many other big companies are using Bitcoin as part of treasury, they can do it easily. With banking, with financial services, that's a little bit more complicated because most of the advantages that we described right now were about disintermediating financial or partially or totally disintermediating financial intermediaries. So when you do that, if your job is to be a financial intermediary, you're basically entering a game of self disintermediation in a way. So how can you provide a service based on a tool that is made in order to disintermediate your kind of services, at least partially? That doesn't mean that there is no room for a bank in Bitcoin, for example. There is. For example, many people, they don't trust self custody because yes, it gives you the power to resist confiscation, but maybe you in your risk assessment, which I mean risk assessment is individual. In your risk assessment, the confiscation scenario is way less probable that I fucked up my setup and lost my coin alone scenario. If that's the case,